son, Kenny Washington, called Sun, I think Sundown, with Gene Tierney, 1940. It's,
Correct.
it's
I
supposed
think
to
it
be
was. I
so,
think it was closer to 1947 or 48. But absolutely, they were both in the film. Had very brief parts. It was at a time when Kenny was with the Rams. You're right.
and I couldn't find either one of them. They're supposed to be African soldiers, although the movie is made in New Mexico, but it's supposed to be Africa, a country in Africa.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think it is actually 1940, just because Dorothy Dandridge is in it, and she's like a teenager in this thing. And by the late, and by 47, when Kenny's with the Rams, I mean she's a young woman. She's in her 20s then. So I think it is 1940 or 40. I think it is 1940, if I'm not mistaken. We can look that up
Well,
later, but go ahead. I was about to say.
no, I was going to say 1940 really was kind of an exciting opportunity for him, and it was the very first movie role he got. And this was indicative, Greg, of Kenny's popularity in Los Angeles. He was far and away the most popular athlete in Los Angeles at that time, and a movie role. It was written specifically for him to star in. It was called While Thousands Cheer, and
Oh
it's kind
yeah,
of a holy grail of sports films because Kenny was the star of the film. It was written to showcase him. It was an all-black cast, produced for primarily for the black cinemas around the country, but it did play in a number of predominantly white cinemas around the country, and it was banned. Well, it had difficulty in some states, but no, it got great reviews. Kenny got tremendous reviews. It was very successful, and that kind of launched Kenny into the motion picture. The motion picture industry, but that was the first film that was indicative of how popular he was in Southern California.
right. And it's just amazing. And I've been trying to find that movie for years. I can't find it.
His family members can't find it, and I
Wow.
did a lot of searching. Some of it was challenging because a lot of the research I did was during the pandemic, the lockdowns, and
Right.
libraries and resources that I've used in the past for other projects were closed. So it was very difficult. But everybody that I talked to and tried to get help from said the same thing. No one's been able to find this film for decades.
And it's incredible because besides having Kenny in there, you got Bantan Moreland. You got
That's
a lot
right.
of well-known folks in this movie. There's a female lead in that, Jean DeGros, I think.
Yes, and she was very prolific, and
Oh
I
God.
think Jenny DeGrom, and
Yeah.
one of the films that you were referring to with Blue and Kenny, I think Jenny DeGrom was the African American female star in that film.
She's in
I'm
that
not
one.
sure if it's Rope of Sand um,
No,
with.
she's in Sundown too, because she comes in with Dorothy
Okay,
Dandridge.
okay, great.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I don't
you
think I've
saw,
seen that one.
yeah, Rope of Sand. I mean, it's amazing to
Rope of
realize,
Sand I've seen, I have, and Burt Lancaster. Kenny
right?
starred opposite Burt Lancaster in that film.
And does a great job in it. I mean, he's playing is supposedly Burt Lancaster's servant, but he's the equal.
Exactly.
He's the equal.
Exactly.
And there's a scene in there, and listeners, we'll get to the sports stuff. I have to say, there's a scene in there that's really stunning for that era. And that's like during the time when he's with the Rams, that Burt Lancaster, helps him heal his wound. He rubs his leg, he puts some alcohol on his leg because he's bleeding.
That's right. That's
And
right.
that's, I mean, and I'm sure that the folks in the South and all the races out there must have went nuts when they saw that part. Because you got a white actor rubbing the leg of a black actor in a movie, it's like, as an equal. And
That's right. That's right.
yeah, rope
And then he was in another very controversial film in 1949 called Pinky,
oh,
which was banned in a few states. Kenny played the role of a doctor, and he was specifically recruited by Darryl F. Zanuck, the head of the studio, for that role. And it was an interracial love scene, and it was
yeah,
an extremely controversial movie. But Zanuck liked to do a pet project every year, a social oriented project, and that was his project for 1949. and Jean Crane was the female lead. She was nominated for an Academy Award. Ethel Barrymore was also one of the standouts in that film, and she too was nominated for an Academy Award. Kenny played the role of a doctor in that movie.
Right. It does a good job in there. And every actor say this to you, Dan. And by the way, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking with Dan Taylor, author of the great book, Walking Alone on Roland in Littlefield Press, about the great Kenny Washington. Every year, I have to say this, one of my little habits is to look at Pinky. And I've looked at this thing, even when I was a kid, I would look at it. And I always am trying to say, do I see anything in here that's worthwhile? And I do, but it's kind of, you take Jean Crane out, and she does it for what she's given. She does a good job. But you really needed a black actress at that time. There were a number of light-skinned actresses who could have done that, but Hollywood was not ready for that.
But Greg, that did get a lot of attention back then. The black papers were all over that, and that was a real big issue that they set. There are clearly some actresses some black actresses that deserved a shot at that role, and the studio felt that America just was not yet ready for an interracial kiss on camera. So, that did get a lot of attention, and all these years later, it still burns within you, as well as I'm sure it does for many people that have seen that film.
It definitely does. But the thing about Kenny Washington is, this guy was actor, athlete, just a little bit of everything. And one thing I found out before we get back to his football stuff is that I didn't know this until I was doing research, for the book. And I went back to the archives of the newspapers.com. I found this thing about he was a keynote speaker and was on a committee when Richard Nixon ran for senator the first time in California.
He was actively recruited, and I think some of that had to do with his popularity. He was. Yeah, no, I agree. And when governors would come to Los Angeles, they would seek him out, largely because of his popularity, and he was very involved. He was very involved with the Catholic Church, trying to get more parks built in Los Angeles, more opportunities for youth to play, more places to play. Because he said, if you don't give kids a place to play, you're opening opportunities for trouble. Right. And he was very, very involved in community projects, and that led to recruitment to be connected to various political campaigns.
And I want to say, listeners, too, that this is the pre-Tricky Dick day. So don't get into this thing. I know some of you are thinking, oh, Richard Nixon, oh, God, he like Richard Nixon. It's a whole different era.
Right.
Keep that in mind.
Exactly.
Keep that in mind. But Kenny, we want to show that Kenny this is how popular and how famous he was. That he was asked to be a part of this committee, asked to be a part of so many things. And I can't think of, outside of later on Jackie Robinson, someone like that who was asked to do so many things at that time.
Very true. Very true.
And I can't, right now, trying to equate it to some athlete right now who is like that, who has been in movies and all, who's asked to speak at places. I guess it right now would be LeBron James, but he has an impact, but not like what Kenny Washington had.
No, I would agree. I mean, you look at all the movies Kenny's been involved in, indicative of his popularity and the various community projects and recruitment to support candidates. Yeah, I as I was working on this, I was trying to think, as popular as he was in Los Angeles, and I've related this to people that in 1939, Alice Marble won Wimbledon. And she came home to Los Angeles and finished second to Kenny Washington in the Athlete of the Year voting among the media. That's how popular he was.
That's amazing.
And I've tried to think at that time of other major cities around the country where a black athlete was the most popular athlete in the city. And certainly you could say Joe Louis Detroit, but Joe Louis, he really had relocated to New York and did most of his fighting out of the Polo Grounds or Madison Square Garden. So I couldn't think of another city where an African-American athlete was the most popular athlete in that major city.
No.
and
And I'm
quite
glad
unique
you
in Los
brought up,
Angeles.
and I'm glad, Dan, you brought up Joe Louis, because there's something I didn't know until I read your book. Talk about how, and this is involves Bing Crosby and, about Kenny Washington being potentially a boxer. Talk about that.
Well, at UCLA, boxing was a big thing. They had a campus-wide tournament, but they also had a varsity boxing team. And as a freshman, they could not pull together enough players to have a freshman baseball team. So Kenny participated in track, but also he signed up to be in the school boxing tournament. And as a freshman, he got to the heavyweight final against a senior. And the senior, who had a lot of experience, much more than Kenny did in the ring, he ended up winning on points. But Kenny impressed a lot of people. And when he got to his senior year, and certainly football and professional baseball are opportunities that he's not able to take advantage of, why boxing promoters remembered what he had done and came calling. And the first was the promoter in New York City for Joe Louis. And he was predicting that within a year, Kenny would succeed Louis as the heavyweight champion of the world if he pursued a boxing career. And Kenny turned the guy down. He felt the financial offer wasn't that good. And he had a number of other offers. The movie was one, and some all-star football games was another. But then Bing Crosby came calling, and Bing was a big fan. Bing was a huge sportsman, but also a big fan of Kenny's. And he came around with the idea that he wanted to back him. And a number of actors, Al Jolson backed Henry Armstrong. There were a number of actors that were very much involved in financially backing boxers in Southern California and around the country as well. But Crosby very much wanted to back Kenny. And he put him together with a man in Southern California who had been the Olympic coach and was regarded as the best boxing coach in the country. And the guy got Kenny in the ring and wanted to check him out. And afterwards, he said that he felt similarly to Joe Louis's promoter, that Kenny in a pretty fast time could become the heavyweight champion of the world.
Amazing.
Bing Crosby made a pretty significant financial offer to Kenny, and at the end, Kenny declined because he said he knew his mother wouldn't be able to take it, and he didn't want to hurt his mother, and so he declined pursuing boxing as a career.
That is really incredible. This is the type of person he was, an athlete. This is incredible. And there's so much we could talk about him, about going back to UCLA. But I want to talk about when he goes to the newly formed, because they had moved from Cleveland, Los Angeles Rams in 1946. Because so many people, when I talk to them about Kenny Washington, they don't realize that he reintegrates the NFL and he signs.
Absolutely.
I think Joe Lillard was the last black player in 1934. 33 to play in the NFL. And then there's this ban until Kenny comes along, and talk about that and what happens in particular. A speech that kind of sets us off by, I think, Hallie Harding.
Hallie Harding, absolutely. Well, first, the Cleveland Rams in 45 won the NFL championship. And they did not play in the big stadium. They played in the old baseball park, which seated about 17,000. And only twice during that championship season did the Rams fill that small stadium. In Los Angeles, Kenny was playing for the Pacific Coast League Hollywood Bears, and week in and week out, they sold out Gilmore Stadium at 22,000. They outdrew the NFL Rams. So I contend that Kenny's the guy that laid the foundation for the success of the NFL on the West Coast. Because until 1940 and the creation of the Pacific Coast League, professional football had never been able to get a toehold on the West Coast. It just had not taken off at all. And Kenny's popularity made that league successful. When the Rams decided to move, their general manager came out to secure a lease agreement with the Coliseum. And at that meeting, Hallie Harding represented the sports editors of three African-American newspapers in Southern California. And he stood up and he took exception to the idea of giving a lease to the Rams. He said, this stadium was constructed with taxpayer money, and African-Americans in this community were among those taxpayers. And this stadium a lease should not be granted to a team and an organization that refuses to allow blacks to participate. Chili Walsh, the Rams general